Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. We're letting people join. Good morning, everybody. All right. Glad everybody's here this morning. Welcome to the Kentucky Harm Reduction and Recovery Community of Practice webinar series presented by Voices of Hope and the University of Kentucky Perinatal Research and Wellness Center. My name is Brooke West. I am a person in recovery and the training coordinator at Voices of Hope in Lexington, Kentucky. The goal of a community of practice is to bring together a group to engage in training, share best practices, and network around a common interest. Today, the topic of our community of practice is how to help survivors, trauma-informed responses to disclosures of interpersonal violence presented by Lenzi Dogen, Acting Director of the Violence Intervention and Prevention Center at the University of Kentucky. But before we hear from Lenzi, we have an update from the University of Kentucky Harm Reduction Hub presented by Dr. Rachel Vickers Smith, who offered initial findings from her project to identify what is in the local street drug supply during our webinar back in September. So a couple of housekeeping notes before we begin. It looks like folks have found the chat, which is great. We have the chat feature turned on so that way you can participate during the webinar and ask questions. And if you are a peer support specialist interested in continuing education credit for this webinar, you will need to complete the survey that we will place in the chat toward the end of the session. So toward the end of the session today, keep an eye out on the chat where we will be posting the link to that survey so you can get your continuing education credit and certificate. So after that, let me see. First, we'll hear from Dr. Vickers Smith, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Epidemiology and Environmental Health. She is a substance use epidemiologist whose research focuses on identifying and preventing adverse outcomes related to changing patterns in the drug use landscape through harm reduction approaches. Dr. Vickers Smith is the co-founder and co-director of the UK Harm Reduction Hub, a transdisciplinary initiative to provide information about the local street drug supply to community organizations and their clients. So we are so excited for this update from the UK Harm Reduction Hub. I will turn it over to you, Dr. Vickers Smith.
Thank you so much, Brooke. All right, I'm going to try sharing screen. Let me make sure this works. All right, you are seeing not the presenter view, but the full screen?
Yes.
Great, okay. Well, as Brooke said, I came in September to share a little bit about the UK Harm Reduction Hub, just an intro and some preliminary findings from a little bit that we did, a little bit of syringe residue testing that we did. And so today I'm back and I really appreciate the time to share with you all and to also learn from you all what you all are hearing. And so what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about what the UK Harm Reduction Hub is in case folks have either forgotten or weren't at the webinar in September. And then I'm going to cover some of the findings from the past couple of months about what we've identified in the street supply. Just a second. Coffee delivery. Okay, so let's see. There we go. Okay. The UK Harm Reduction Hub. So it's an initiative that brings together a transdisciplinary team, just people with lots of different perspectives and expertise from both community-based scientists and academic scientists and harm reductionists to try to identify what is going on in Kentucky's street drug supply. And we do that through the analysis of drug residue from used syringes. So you could imagine that it's really easy to get used syringes. We can get them from Sharps containers. There are folks that do cleanup along walkways, roadways, things like that. And so we can take that. Dr. Amanda Fallon Bennett is also a co-founder and co-director of the Harm Reduction Hub. And I like to use the phrase that she kind of refers to what our initiative is, and it's taking trash. Used syringes are trash, and like kind of trash to treasure, right? Like we are finding knowledge, information about what's in the street supply, and getting that information back out into the public, so that people who use drugs, people who love and care for people who use drugs, our communities can learn what's in the supply, because knowledge is power. So anyway, it's kind of a trash to treasure model, right? And so we work with community-based organizations throughout Kentucky to gather these syringes, and we bring them back to the lab for testing. And really key to this initiative are two-way feedback loops with our partners and also the community. So we take these syringes, we analyze them, we, come up with, and I'll go through how we do the testing. We have a list of all of these substances that were identified in the syringe residue, and then we give that information back. And we are working on also making it publicly available for anybody who is interested to be able to see what's been detected in the local supply, which will be coming in future months. But we want to communicate these findings in a way that is meaningful. So we work with chemists at the University of Kentucky, forensic toxicologist, and they know all of these chemical names and structures and compounds, and that doesn't mean anything to me. And so what we are trying to do is to take this, very technical information, and in collaboration with our community partners, present it in a way that is meaningful, that people who use drugs, for example, can say, oh, this is what they found, and this is what it means for me. And so we also can't do that without input from our community partners. And also, for example, today in the webinar, I'm hoping that we can get some information from you all as well to just help us to improve our messaging and what is meaningful to the community. So feedback loops are really critical to the translation of this information. And we exist as a service first and foremost. We are at UK, which is an academic research institution, but the goal of this is not to conduct research. The goal of this is to provide information, to test what's in the syringes and get that information back out into the public. So it is a service first and foremost. So, all right, some of the nuts and bolts about how the Harm Reduction Hub works. We have a lab that is run by Professor Mike Ward, who is a toxicological chemist, and he was a forensic toxicologist at the Kentucky Medical Examiner's Office for 33 years. So has just a tremendous amount of experience and expertise in street drugs, because that is what he was analyzing, in the medical examiner's office. We have an internship program that students can complete with us. There are some positions in our lab that students can, especially if they are in a toxicology program, they can get practice testing real world drugs rather than what they usually test, which is like, a pure sample of fentanyl or a pure sample of heroin, which, as we know, that like doesn't exist in the real world on the street, in street drugs. So this gives them the opportunity uh to look at street drugs, and prepare them better for their work once they graduate. We also have internship for public health and nursing students to help with communication, flyers, social media reports, things like that. And to also, get information, work on those two-way feedback loops. At our current capacity, we can test about 150 to 200 syringes per month, although we are hoping to really jump that up quite a bit in the coming months. I do want to just let you know, I'll be showing some syringes here in the next slide. And so just want to give a heads up about that. All right, so this type of testing works by, we have these sharps containers that are full of used syringes and other things, right? Like people can put anything in a sharps container. So what happens is we bring these sharps containers to our lab, our on-site lab. With a little finagling, we get the top off and lay out the syringes so that we can label them and prepare them for analysis. Then, so from that, there's a little bit of residue left in the syringes. What they do in the lab is they take that residue out and they prepare it in these little tiny sample containers. And so they use things like methanol to prepare the sample in order to go through the gas chromatographer mass spectrometer, which is down here at the bottom. It's a large machine that the samples go through. Using this really long syringe, you inject it into the gas chromatographer. GC is its short name, abbreviated name. And what that does is it like breaks up the substance. So whatever is in that residue, it breaks it up into all of these gas particles. Then those gas particles move through into the mass spectrometer, MS. So if you've heard GCMS, this is that process. They move through into the mass spectrometer. And basically what happens is they're from thousands, probably millions of tests over time. There are these standard libraries that have been created, not in our lab, just like, chemists across time have developed these libraries of substances. And based on how they kind of move through this mass spectrometer, they create a pattern that is unique to a substance. And so what you get is this output that looks like this. And these peaks align with the library of standards, for example. So if there is, this is just something, just a GCMS graph I found online. I'm not entirely sure what this substance is, but basically what happens is, you could imagine within the residue that there's probably a number of different substances. And so, again, the gas chromatographer breaks them up into all their different components, and then the mass spectrometer identifies them based on their weight. And so these peaks can align with known standards in these libraries. So for example, like a fentanyl, if fentanyl was identified, its peak would align with a standard that we know is fentanyl. And so if there's a match, the library standard has a certain peak for fentanyl, and if our peak matches with that, then we have confidence that there is likely fentanyl in the supply in this particular sample. Okay, that's a lot of information, but basically I wanted to just kind of share how the process works. And so with multiple substances, there can be multiple different peaks, and that's how, the folks are identifying what's in this supply. So what can we learn from syringes? The pros are that we can identify new substances in the street drug supply. They're easily available. Like I said, it's trash. These syringes in the sharps containers are going in the trash. And so we're able to take those, there's not a cost to it. There's not a preparation. We are just able to take the syringes in the sharps containers back to our lab. We can keep an eye on trends and changes over time in the street supply. So as we continue to do this, we can say, oh, we're identifying, more meth, less fentanyl, or more fentanyl, more meth, more xylazine, less heroin, which of course we know is true. And so we're able to kind of watch how the street supply changes over time. Which is really useful information. If somebody thinks that they are using fentanyl, but it turns out to be something else, nitazine, something like that, we can watch it's a surveillance tool, right? And that we can inform the public about so that they can make informed decisions about their drug use. And a pro is that it is anonymous. And so we are not able to tie a syringe back to any individual person. These are, not labeled before they get to us. There's no way that we can say this syringe was used by this person. It's completely anonymous. And so that breaks down a lot of barriers that could exist, if we were saying, we would like you to give us your syringes, and then we're able to tie them back to you. They're just kind of in this communal pot, and we know generally where they come from, like in terms of a county, but we don't know the person. So there's also some cons to this too. It's not perfect. We know that syringes are often reused. And so we aren't able to say that a certain drug was found in a particular supply. So for example, if someone uses both fentanyl and methamphetamine and uses them separately, maybe they use fentanyl, inject fentanyl, and then later on inject methamphetamine. We test that. We see that there is both fentanyl and methamphetamine in the residue, but it could be that those are two different supplies, right? Or it could be that there is fentanyl in the meth supply or meth in the fentanyl supply. And then if you have something like xylazine in there as well, if they are two different supplies, we don't know if the xylazine was in the fentanyl supply or if it was in the methamphetamine supply, right? So all we can say is that these substances have been identified. So there are some limitations to syringe testing as opposed to like actual sample testing. We also don't know, our current method isn't telling us how much of a particular drug was found in a sample. We just know whether it was present, yes or no. And a con, I put anonymous here as a con as well, because then you can't get that information back to a particular person. Like, we analyzed your syringe, and in your syringe, you had the following substances. So it can be a pro, but also a con. Okay. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I am not keeping an eye on the chat, so maybe if Brooke or Amanda could let me know if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them as I go. All right, so what I'm going to present now are results from syringes that we gathered from January to April of this year. These are only from Jefferson County. That won't always be the case, but it just happened to be the case for this bunch of syringes that we got. We tested residue from 190 samples. They were primarily syringes. There were a few cookers in there as well. 156 of them contained some sort of residue. 34 had no substances. And this can happen because, if someone finds syringes, they may drop them into a sharps container. I know that I've heard that may happen at like Voices of Hope. If you find, several syringes or a bunch of syringes, you just drop them in the sharps container to get them out of the way in a safe way. So these were likely just unused syringes. The top compounds that were detected in our lab. So methamphetamine, xylazine, and fentanyl were in almost 50% of all of the syringes that we tested that had substances in them. I'll go into combinations next in a few slides, but this is just, did a syringe contain methamphetamine, yes or no, regardless of what else was in it. So 50%, almost 50% contained meth, xylazine, fentanyl, and or diphenhydramine. Diphenhydramine is Benadryl. It's a common cutting agent that can mimic some of the sedative effects of, say, like fentanyl or something like that, or even xylazine. Acetaminophen, Tylenol, also a common cutting agent. Tramadol, we know, is an opioid, a prescription opioid. That was found in 26% of syringes. Lidocaine, which is a local anesthetic, kind of a numbing agent, also is used as a common cutting agent, was found in 25%. Dimethyl sulfone, it was in 19%. It's a dietary supplement that is often used to cut meth. Sorbitol, another cutting agent, and cocaine was in 5%. So you can see that there were a lot of cutting agents that we identified. And this is not the full list. This is just the top 10. But there were also, some psychoactive substances that were identified too. So then if we compare this to, there is a national testing site called NIST. They test samples from across the US. And they provide a report of what they find. They will test syringes, so people can swab syringes and send in, they have kind of these kits that you prepare. So they ask you, like, what is this coming from? Like, what is this sample that you're sending us coming from? Because you can't send like an actual syringe, or you can't send, a baggie of residue. You have to swab it and prepare it, but then you provide information about what it came from. So they test, most of what they receive is from syringe swabs, baggie residue swabs, cookers, things like that. And so they, they send out a newsletter about monthly of what they have identified. So you can see here, methamphetamine was also one of the top substances that they identified. Fentanyl, cocaine is much more prevalent in their sample than it was in ours. For ANPP, it is almost always linked with fentanyl. So what that is, when people are preparing fentanyl, when they're making it, you know, at the high levels of the supply, you take all of these different substances and combine them together and do some things to them, and it turns into fentanyl. Well, sometimes not everything turns into fentanyl, and there are some like byproducts that can still have effects. So for 4-ANPP is one of those. It's an indicator of manufactured fentanyl, not prescription pharmaceutical grade fentanyl. So in our sample, this is under fentanyl or fentanyl related. The fentanyl and ANPP are combined in this number 4 in our sample here.
Hey, Rachel, we've got a question in the chat about what fentanyl related means. Could you just expand on what else that might include?
Yeah, yes. Thank you for that question. So fentanyl, 4-ANPP, it can also include fentanyl analogs. So those can be like kind of cousins of fentanyl. So anything related to, you know, because if we broke them out into all of the different types of fentanyl, there could be a lot of different kinds. So those are all in our sample, we group them into fentanyl or fentanyl related. Okay, so then lidocaine also found here. Medetomidine. This is another animal tranquilizer, like xylazine, but it's more potent. It has been emerging primarily in the East Coast. We have not found it in Kentucky's supply yet from the syringes that we've tested. It does not mean that it's not here. It just means that we haven't identified it in our samples.
Hey,
Caffeine.
Rachel.
Yes.
Sorry, one more
No.
follow-up. Ethan in the chat's asking about this fentanyl related question and if heroin specifically was found in the samples.
We did find some heroin in our supply, but only a handful of samples contained it. So those would be, heroin is broken out separately. Any other opioid, just a fentanyl analogs anything related to the production of fentanyl goes into the fentanyl or fentanyl related category for us. But heroin is separate. We did find a handful of heroin. Okay, so caffeine, a cutting agent, tetracaine, similar to lidocaine, it's a local anesthetic used for cutting. Heroin was found in the U.S. supply. Again, we found a little bit of it, but not much. And then acetaminophen or Tylenol as a cutting agent. So you can see some similarities, but also some differences, particularly in the percentage or the prevalence of certain drugs that are found in ours compared to a national sample. All right, so now let's look at combinations. Let me orient you to what's going on here before I get into it. So each of these pie charts focuses on syringes that contain a particular substance. So in this top left pie chart, these are all of the syringes that contained xylazine. All of these in the top left contain xylazine. In the top right, all of these contained fentanyl. And in the bottom center here, all of these contained methamphetamine. So what we're trying to do is say, of all of the syringes with this particular substance, this is the percentage that contained this other substance. And so we focused on xylazine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine and combinations of those because those were the most prevalent in our compounds. When we're presenting this doesn't mean that these were the only drugs found in that syringe residue. So, for example, in the xylazine pie chart, you see here that the most of all of the syringes that contain xylazine, 61% of them also contained fentanyl. 17% contained xylazine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine. 16% contained xylazine without meth or fentanyl. But again, this does not mean that there was nothing else in the supply. There was nothing else identified in that syringe, okay? So of those containing fentanyl, 65% also contain xylazine. Then the next most common was a mixture of fentanyl, xylazine, and methamphetamine. Of those containing methamphetamine, the majority contained methamphetamine without fentanyl and without xylazine. Again, this does not mean that there was nothing else in the methamphetamine. And then the next most common was a mixture of methamphetamine, fentanyl, and xylazine. Okay, so moving on to substances identified, we recently identified BTMPS. It was in 4 samples. It's also called Tinoven 770. And what is that? It is an industrial chemical that's used for plastics. It's not meant for human consumption. There's no approved uses. It's basically put into plastics in order to keep them from melting. And this is from the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. They give some information about these are directly connected to supplies that tested positive for BTMPS. So somebody could have either brought in some residue before they used or tested it after they used. And so for those who smoked it, they said that they experienced some ear ringing, blurred vision, bloody cough, unusual taste. For those that injected, they felt some burning sensations. And right now there's nothing there's no test strip that will detect BTMPS. And so the recommendation right now is to continue to use harm reduction strategies for preventing overdose. And then, if talking with a healthcare provider or with recovery coaches about, if they're feeling something different, and then we can try to find additional information. Right now, because it's a new contaminant, we just don't have a lot of information on ways to treat any negative effects that are a cause of BTMPS, that are caused by BTMPS. So it was identified with fentanyl and heroin in 2 syringes and fentanyl and meth in 2 syringes.
Hey, Rachel, you've got 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you. So the other substance that we identified was nitazene or nitazene. It was in 2 samples, identified with tramadol, xylazine, and fentanyl in 1 syringe, tramadol, xylazine, fentanyl, and methamphetamine in another syringe. These are manufactured opioids like fentanyl, but they can be much more potent than fentanyl. And so again, just like we do with other opioids, naloxone can work to overdose it. It may take more than one, but again, waiting the period of time before giving another dose of naloxone. Rescue breathing is very critical, just really important to do. So to summarize, most of the syringes contain multiple substances. Xylazine, fentanyl, and meth are highly prevalent. We identified BTMPS and nitazenes, but only in a small number of syringes. So we don't want to cause panic. We just want to provide information that these are identified, but it's not like it's in every syringe that we tested. What these results mean: harm reduction is critical. Polysubstance use is very common, whether intentional or not. We know that the street drug supply is highly contaminated. And so, okay, we want to hear from you. I don't know if we'll have time right now. I apologize, I went over, but would love for you to put in the chat what you are hearing about the street drug supply. Are you hearing things that we identified? Are you hearing things that we haven't detected? Would really love to hear about what you are hearing from clients. We're also hoping to come back more regularly and provide updates. And so would love to hear from you in the chat what else you would like to see in our updates. Are these combinations that we presented helpful? Are there other combinations you would like to see? And then, of course, would love for you to connect with us. Here's our email address. And you can get free fentanyl and xylazine test strips delivered through KYHRC via Next Distro. Of course, they're also available at Voices of Hope. So again, sorry I went over, but thank you so much for your time. And please reach out and also drop any information in the chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rachel. How do I sign up for the coffee delivery service, by the way?
I know.
That was great. No, but thank you so much for sharing your this valuable work with us. It's so important. And any feedback we get through the chat, we'll send to you and to Amanda. And so now we'll transition to our second presentation today, how to help survivors, trauma-informed responses to disclosures of interpersonal violence, presented by Lenzi Dogen. Lenzi Dogen currently serves as the acting director of the Violence Intervention and Prevention Center, the VIP Center, while also providing survivor advocacy and prevention education to the UK community. Lenzi has been working at VIP for 7.5 years and feels like working at VIP is a dream job. Lenzi received both her bachelor's and master's in social work from the University of Kentucky College of Social Work, then began her career as a court advocate with Greenhouse 17, the local domestic violence service agency. Since then, she has made a personal and professional commitment to the movement to help survivors and to help our community stay safer, be safer for the next generation to come. And so thank you so much for being with us, Lenzi. I will turn it over to you.
Perfect. Brooke, can you see my screen and hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay.
for both.
Okay, perfect. It's been a minute since I've done a webinar, so we'll get through the technology pieces together. So, thank you so much for that warm introduction. Hello, everyone. As Brooke just said, my name is Lenzi Dogen. I do a lot of things here at the Violence Intervention and Prevention Center here at the University of Kentucky. But one of the things that I do, is provide the campus with prevention education. And today we're going to talk through some secondary prevention education, which is how to help survivors and how to respond to survivors in a trauma-informed, survivor-centered way. I'll be giving everybody some pro tips, Lenzi's pro tips from me to you, and then hopefully we can share out together and learn from each other as well. The VIP Center is located right in the heart of the UK campus. We provide confidential advocacy and support to students, staff, and faculty who have had an experience with interpersonal violence. And I use the word interpersonal violence because it can include a lot of different experiences. It can include things like sexual assault. It can include dating and domestic or intimate partner violence. It can include stalking, family violence, trafficking. That's probably not an exhaustive list, but I'm hopeful that it gives you a good snapshot about what folks may come and talk to us about. The majority of the clients that we serve are students here at the university, but like I said, we do serve faculty, staff, and employees here at the university as well. So I want to give you a quick, really brief overview here. My team and I developed this this presentation after the UK sororities had come to the VIP Center and said, hey, it would be really great and we would really love it if you could come and talk to us a little bit about how we can respond to each other when one of our friends or one of our loved ones or a family member or one of our sorority sisters discloses that something has happened to them and that they're a survivor or that they have been victimized in some kind of way. So I give you that framework because I want you to feel like I like to know like where we came from and how we got here. So This leads me to our learning session today. My hope is that I get a lot of participation from you all using the chat. That would be great. There'll be a lot of opportunities to jump in, so please feel welcome that whenever there is whenever there's participation, like go ahead and type in and jump into the chat. I really like learning from you all as well, and I think some of the best and the richest learning experiences is when we get to learn from each other as well. Today's topic is about interpersonal violence. I am going to talk about trauma and traumatic experiences. My expertise is with IPV or interpersonal violence, and so I'll be talking about it through that lens. I want everyone here to make sure that they feel confident and comfortable to take care of themselves during this conversation. If you need to take a break, or if this information becomes harmful to your well-being, please feel welcome to take care of you. So today we're going to learn from each other, and we're going to learn with respect. And then our learning objectives today is we're going to talk about trauma, the impact of trauma. We're going to do some skill building, some real basic, easy skill building around trauma-informed responses. And hopefully that you'll be able to take away some key things with you to have in your pocket, that if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're working with a survivor, either professionally or personally, if you have someone in your life that discloses to you or shares with you that something has happened or something is currently happening related to IPV or in trauma in general, you will have some good things to be able to respond and say that is trauma informed and caring and compassionate. Okay. All right, you're going to hear me say a lot about being trauma informed today. And before we talk about what trauma informed is, we got to talk about what trauma is. And trauma is trauma is exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence by directly experiencing the event or events, witnessing the event occur to others, learning about the traumatic event that has occurred to a close family member, close friend, or someone who's meaningful to you, or experiencing repeated exposure to details of the traumatic event, right? So that's a pretty comprehensive definition. And I like that definition because it talks about you don't have to necessarily be the one to directly experience the trauma to experience its impact. Trauma comes from a Greek word. It's here on the slide. I will full stop. I don't know how to speak Greek, so my my Kentucky accent is not going to allow me to even try that word, so I won't do that. But the definition of this Greek word is to wound. And I really like this definition, and I like to be able to think about the origin, because when we think about traumatic experiences, and this can be anything from a car accident, a natural disaster, war, the death of a loved one, and of course, anything related to IPV like sexual violence, intimate partner violence, stalking. All of these experiences can be traumatic. And everything that they all have in common is the wounding part. So, yes, so if anyone out there speaks Greek, maybe they would be willing to teach us that. But just so you know, I won't attempt that. Okay, this is where I'm going to ask I see that there's 83 participants, and my hope my hope is that we can get some participation out there. So get your fingers ready to type into the chat here how trauma can impact us. Let's talk through how trauma can impact people. And I've broken it down into 3 categories, or like buckets. Here we've got emotional impact, physical impact, and mental or psychological impact. And if you could go ahead and start typing into the chat some ways that you feel like, and I'm going to open up my chat and I'm going to hope that I can read it. some ways that you feel like trauma can impact you emotionally, physically, and or mentally and psychologically. Anxiety, thank you. PTSD, that's right. Difficulty connecting. It makes us angry and sad, right? That's usually, those two things are usually connected. Cortisol production, fear or rejection. It causes us to build walls because we lose our sense of justice in the world. We get moody, we get depressed, physical, we get acid reflux, migraines, fatigue, nightmares. Yes, all of this is great. Thank you all so much. I can already tell that you all probably are well versed in this, and so hopefully this is, if for some of you this may just be a quick review, and for others we might be able to take some little gold gems and stick them in our pocket with us today. Thank you all so much. So, I feel like for me, the first thing that I recognize when I am under severe duress is my physical body. And that usually starts to give me clues about my emotional, mental, and psychological well-being before before the emotional things come up. And if that resonates with any of you all, I just know that I see you and I hear you. But some other things that we can start to notice about trauma is the way that it shows up either in different aspects in the different places of our life. When we experience trauma, for a lot of IPV survivors, they experience trauma, and there is no aspect or no place in their life where something isn't affected by this, right? So if you're a student and you're trying to go to school, sometimes it can have an impact on your grades and your ability to make that work. If you are trying to like get up in the morning and have a routine and go to work every day, that can get disrupted because you're having all of these physical and emotional symptoms of the impact of trauma. And so I just listed a few here. You all had some really wonderful things. Thank you all so much for sharing that. Um, sorry. All right. So we're going to jump right in to the actual learning part about how we want to respond. So, because we have such a good understanding of the way that trauma can impact people, ourselves, and people around us, we want to talk about the skills that we'll need in order to respond to those folks in a trauma-informed way. And again, my hope is that you walk away with some sort of a solid understanding that not only do we have a good idea of how trauma can impact a person, how it shows up and how it manifests with someone, but then we also have some really good tangible skills that we can use when someone discloses to us or when someone is talking about their experiences, their traumatic experiences, that we show up in a compassionate and trauma-informed way. So the very first thing that we want to do with folks who are trusting us with this information about, hey, I experienced something or something has happened, or I'm a survivor, or usually survivors don't come out and say that. They usually say at the very beginning stages of disclosing, they might say something like, something's happened. And or they might come out with it and like they're, I don't know if I want to talk about something, there's something on my mind and I know I need to talk about it, but I'm not ready to talk about it. And that's okay, right? Because our responses, the basics, the real foundation of how we respond is always going to be the same, which is listening, believe and validate, and then checking in to see what we can do to be helpful in that time. So let's go ahead and try and dive into these three things. I want to start with active listening. Okay, participation again, jump in here. Who here has ever felt like they were talking to someone, but that person wasn't listening? What things did you see or experience when that person was not, or you did not feel like that person was listening to you? No eye contact, okay? On their phone, not focused. Mm-hmm. They try to talk over you or at the same time as you, as if they're not actually hearing the words that are coming out of your mouth. These are really good. Looking at the clock or their watch, right? So now our phones are connected to some of our smart watches. And so it's really hard to have a conversation with someone who's constantly looking down at their watch. So not just their phone, but their watch too. Sometimes you'll stop talking just to see. Maybe they're on their computer. They're just generally not paying attention, interrupting. They say the same thing over, like, yep, or whatever. Yeah. Let's I agree with this whole list. When someone is talking about something that's important to them, the last thing that we want to say is whatever, right? It feels so bad to have to be talking about something that is important to you and then to have the other person respond in an unkind way. Okay. The next question, the next thing, get your fingers ready. Let's type up. What did it feel like to have someone listen and really truly hear you while you were talking? What were the things that they did? Eye contact. They paid attention. You felt supported. Body language. Yeah, we're going to talk about some nonverbal cues here in just a second. They shared their thoughts. They didn't interrupt. They responded in an appropriate way to the conversation. They were sincere and kind. Okay. Thank you all so much. I felt valued, right? Like our words are valuable. That is important. Okay. Okay. Showed gratitude, saying thanks for sharing that with me. That's an excellent, save that, put a pin in that one. Thanks for sharing that with me, because that's going to be really important during our conversation today. So active listening is really about what you're doing in that moment when someone is talking to you, that conveys to them that you're present, that you're actively listening, and that you are hearing the words that are coming out of their mouth. Active refers to not only listening, but closely hearing what the individual is saying to demonstrate to that person that you are listening and that you are present in the conversation. Okay, and so there was a lot of in the chat today, there's lots of references to eye contact. And eye contact in typical ways are usually a pretty good sign that someone is with you. Like, hey, I'm making eye contact with you. I'm with you. Now, I want us to make a quick note about eye contact. Eye contact is not always the easiest thing for trauma survivors, and it's certainly not easy for our neurodivergent friends. And so when someone is talking to us, but they may not be making eye contact, it's important that maybe we look for some other clues or some other nonverbal cues in their behavior to see if they're with us, just only because eye contact is usually a pretty good way, but it can't be the only way that we judge whether or not someone is being present with us. I myself am neurodivergent, and so I have a tendency to talk really big with my hands, and sometimes I talk really fast, and sometimes I stutter, and I don't always make the best eye contact, even though I really work hard to try to do that when I'm talking to folks, because I want folks to be able to feel like I am with them. So sometimes when I am struggling with eye contact, I have to rely on my other nonverbal cues and my body language and the way that I respond. So I try to have, when I'm talking with survivors or when I'm talking to someone who just have something important to say to me, I try to have a nice and relaxed body and posture, so that the open posture, so that they feel like I am open to whatever it is that they say. I try to keep my hands as quiet as I can. I also enjoy doing nonverbal cues such as nodding my head and saying, mm-hmm, yep. Uh-huh. Yeah, I hear you. And while active listening requires more body language and nonverbal cues than it does verbally affirming that you're listening. It's not a bad thing to be like, okay, yeah, I hear you. I don't have a slide on this, but I will give you a quick pro tip about reflective listening or reflexive listening. And reflective listening is when you are able to repeat back to the person what they've said. So I usually like to start that statement with, uh-huh, yeah, okay, I think I'm hearing you. What I just heard you say is, and then I'll do a brief paraphrase or a summary of what they just said, just to make sure that they feel like I'm hearing them, that I'm listening, that I'm present with them. And reflective listening techniques such as, okay, so what I'm hearing you say is, it also gives that person the empowerment to clarify or correct if you have misheard them, which is also really empowering and helpful when you're working with trauma survivors. Remember that survivors of IPV have often experienced some type of, they've often experienced some type of violation where they have felt not in control and not empowered in those moments. And when someone experiences that, every opportunity that you have to restore that and give that back to them, not only does it earn trust, but it helps that person's healing process overall. Okay. What I heard you say was, okay, I just wanted to check the chat and make sure that we were okay. My computer screen doesn't exactly let me see both at the same time. So that's okay. We're doing what we can with what we got. Okay. The next is to believe and validate. Throw it into the chat, friends. Why do you think believing someone who has said, something happened, I've experienced this has been part of my story, whatever that may be, why do we think that that's part of our conversation today? Okay, it helps to build trust. Do we feel like survivors always feel like they're believed? No, we don't. Yeah. Because someone else may not have believed us in the past, right? So maybe we tried to talk about this with someone that we loved and trust, and their response has made us feel kind of shaky about talking about it ever again. And so we just filed it away into our brain and never talked about it ever again because we just weren't sure that we were going to feel believed or validated or heard. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you all's participation. Believing survivors is one of the most crucial elements to their healing and their restoration after the violence has occurred. So I'm going to give you a quick example and have your fingers ready for the chat, okay? If I told everyone here, there's 80 participants, 80-ish, okay? If I told all of you all here that on my way home from work last night, I stopped and got gas, would you believe me? Okay. Seeing lots of yeses, right? That seems like a pretty normal behavior activity to do after you leave work. The biggest lie I've ever told myself is that I was going to get gas before work. No. So, okay. So if I told everyone here that I stopped on my way home and got gas, and then I saw my ex at the gas station, it creeped me out, made me feel pretty uneasy. Wouldn't it be, sorry, my brain got moving really fast, and my mouth couldn't keep up. Wouldn't it be a really kind response to me or to anyone else who says, I saw my ex last night at the gas station, it creeped me out. I didn't feel super great about that. Wouldn't it be such a better, kinder, more compassionate, more trauma-informed response to say, oh, are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? Do you need anything? But survivors so often hear things like, why would you be uneasy or scared to get gas? That seems so silly. You uneasy or scared, or why were you creeped out? Did your ex like try to talk to you or something? Or my favorite, why didn't you just leave and go to another gas station? How did your ex know what gas station you use? Have you been in contact with your ex to tell your ex what gas station you use? Right? I am using this example, okay? I'm using this example to demonstrate sometimes what people say, even if they're well-intentioned and well-meaning, that sometimes the words that we say in response to someone who says, I had this experience, it made me feel this, that our responses in that moment can be so incredibly powerful and helpful. Or if we might not get it right, it can actually cause some hurt, or it can cause someone, like just what we heard from each other in the chat, it can cause a lot of trust issues later on. In other words, if I told you I got gas, I saw my ex, it creeped me out, we start with believing and validating those feelings in that experience, because what matters most in that moment is the relationship, the connection, and being and working towards our trauma informed care to other people. Validating someone just means that we are acknowledging and accepting a person's inner experience, thoughts and feelings and behaviors as valid. In other words, they're real, they're correct, right? They're understood, right? We all have feelings, and we all have this wide spectrum of feelings. So it's really important that when people say, I had this experience and this is how it made me feel, that we start by believing. There's a couple of good reasons why we believe and validate survivors. A couple of really good reasons that I'll share with you. First and foremost, we actually have a pretty robust body of research and empirical peer-reviewed data to suggest that false accusations are very rare. Okay, so this always comes up in the conversation. What about false accusations, right? I want you to know that from the research, that false accusations of IPV happen about 3% of the time. And that is in line with the rates at which other crimes are falsely reported. Okay, so if someone is, I don't know, stealing a car, right? That's just a random crime that I thought of. False reports about that crime happen at about 3% of the time. The same goes for IPV crimes, okay? That means that when we start by believing, we have a pretty good chance of believing someone who is actually being truthful about their lived experiences and the way that it has made them feel. So I don't know about you, but I like 97% odds. I'm with you on that. The other reason is that regardless of the percentages and the research and the numbers, like regardless of any of those things, it's just not our job to be any kind of fact finder or investigator or evidence collector of any kind. Like, that's just not our job. Our job in the moment when someone we care about, whether it's someone that we work with, one of our clients, it's a family member or a close friend or a sorority sister or whoever it may be, someone that we're close to, someone that we care about. Whenever they tell us that this was their lived experience and this is how it made them feel, we believe them and we validate. Thank you for telling me. I believe you. Oh, it must have felt really bad. That must have been a really stressful situation. And when we do that, we start by believing. We actually begin individually, one by one, starting to shift our culture away from survivors feeling like they can't be believed and into, yeah, we believe you. And we're so thankful that you told us. How can we be helpful to you and support you? Okay. Okay. All right. Believe and validate. Get your fingers ready for some participation. Okay. All right. If someone were to tell you that something happened, that they've had this experience, with IPV, maybe they've had some sort of other traumatic experience. Maybe they were sexually assaulted. Maybe their partner is controlling, or maybe it was some kind of other type of traumatic experience. What kinds of things can you respond with? What kinds of phrases or statements that you feel like we can respond with that lets that person feel like you are listening to them and that they are believed and validated? I'm going to open up this chat. Okay. Are you okay? Come get this hug. How are you feeling after you've shared that? What can I do to help you now? There's some controversy, and I don't mind to talk about this a bit, but someone has put into like maybe relate with a similar story. Now, in my field of work, there is like two schools of thoughts on that. One is you should never self-disclose, and the other is that you should be able to relate to your clients by self-disclosing as long as it is not harmful to the person that you're disclosing to. Um, I tend to fall somewhere in the middle, meaning that I don't want to disclose my own lived experiences, unless I feel like it could be of benefit to the conversation. Because the last thing I want to do is center myself in that moment. Okay. Thank you for sharing this with me. I believe you. Have you looked for any help? And then I think a good follow-up, have you looked for help, is would you like for me to help you with that part? And I'm going to talk to you all about how to know your resources today too. So you'll be equipped to utilize that as well. Thank you all so much for sharing. Those were excellent. Some really easy things I'd like for you to stick in your pocket today. If any of these feel right for you, I believe you. I'm sorry that happened. This is not your fault. Oftentimes survivors feel like what has happened to them is because of something they did. And no one is responsible for the harm that has been caused except for the person that is causing the harm. Okay, so that blame does not belong to the person that's being harmed. Some validation. Wow, that sounded really scary. Oh, it makes total sense that you are feeling creeped out. It would be kind of creepy to see your ex at the gas station randomly, right? So, okay, so those are some quick good. Now, checking in. The third thing is checking in. Checking in might look a little bit different depending on what your relationship is with this person, what kind of it can look different based on like how much time you spend with them. Like, do you have a working relationship, or are you friends with them? Are they a person in your family? So that's going to look different depending on that relationship. But checking in is really working on centering the other person and decentering yourself. I mentioned that in the slide before when we talked about self-disclosure. It's so important that when someone has decided that they trust us with this information, that we set aside whatever we think and feel and really work on centering that person that is sharing those things. I also want to validate all of us as human beings who are probably like in this field because we're very caring, and empathetic human beings. And I know for myself, I hope this resonates with you all too, that, doing this work, it's not that I have taught myself to be unfeeling in that moment. In fact, I still feel very intensely when someone is sharing with me, when a survivor is talking to me about what has happened to them. Um, I joke because I like to use a sense of humor to as a coping strategy, but I joke that I very much align myself with the Hulk, because the secret is that he's always angry, and I will let you all know that like the anger for me is very, very tangible. It's always right there for me. So I just want you to know that I'm not telling you that you can't feel things. In fact, you are going to feel things. It's takes some skill and a little bit of practice to be able to feel your feelings and to make sure that you're centering in that moment, you're centering the person that is that's sharing with you. Assumptions aren't helpful. So previously we had talked about maybe offering a hug to someone. And I think that, again, that really depends on your relationship with that person. And so I want to give Lindsay's pro tip here. I want to give everybody some really quick, just some quick information about like hugs or holding someone's hand or just physical touch in general. So my overall rule is that we don't want to touch a person unless we have consent to do so, right? So if you have a relationship with this person and you know that they like hugs or that they like physical comfort, right? That might be something that you offer as a means to get that consent. In other words, I can tell that this is really hard for you. Would you like a hug? Right? That if you know that person, you know they like hugs, that would be very appropriate. But if we don't know that person, we're not sure about where, we're not really sure if they're a hugger or if they don't like to be touched, right? There's probably some of us in this room that don't really appreciate being touched. We have a personal bubble and we don't like it when people violate that. So so I want to make sure that we're being very cautious and careful about this space bubble. And the reason why I say this is because oftentimes survivors, again, feel a wide range of emotions. We feel our own emotions, and sometimes we can't feel, we feel like we know that that person needs physical comfort, but in that moment, it may not be the most helpful thing. Remember, IPV survivors have often had a violation of their body. And so it's really important that if we're working to restore that empowerment and that reclamation of their body, that we don't want to risk violating that again, right? So that's my pro tip on physical comfort, like hugs or hand holding or stuff like that. Okay. I also would like for you all to know that survivors and trauma, actually all trauma survivors um, typically have a wide range of how people respond to this. Okay. So in our brain, sometimes we can think about, okay, if someone has experienced sexual assault, then they should be responding in this emotional way. Um, an example is a lot of times people feel like that sexual assault would make someone very emotional, very sad, and cry. And the truth is that sometimes people do cry, but not everyone cries. Okay. Not everyone is going to cry in that moment. I am a person that I don't really particularly, I don't know if this resonates with my fellows here, with my friends today, but I'm a person who doesn't really like to freely cry in front of people. That doesn't make me feel good. So I'm probably going to give you a different type of emotional response than crying. Okay. Sometimes our survivors, instead of what we think they should be responding with, will respond with actually something very opposite of that. I said earlier that I like to use humor as a means to cope. So I may not give you my tears, but I might throw in a joke, right? And might nervously laugh at a funeral or something like that. And if that's you, you're my people, and I appreciate you. So I want you all to know that survivors do the exact same thing. Sometimes survivors are very flat and very emotionless, meaning that they don't really have, they're not sharing a whole lot of emotions in that moment. That doesn't mean that they're not feeling them. It just means that what they're expressing or how this is manifesting is not coming out to the surface right now. Again, rage and anger is also another really common thing. I don't know if you all have experience working with trauma survivors, but sometimes the most accessible emotion and the one that we see the most is the anger. So those folks often end up getting written off as folks with like really bad attitudes and they're just tough to be around. But I want you to know that the anger is actually part of the process. And if we can decenter ourselves about how we feel about the anger and really see the person like the holistic person, it helps us cope with whatever is manifesting and presenting in that moment with that trauma survivor. There's a whole bunch of neurobiological explanations for the brain and the hormones that get released in traumatic experiences and when people are triggered in the aftermath of traumatic experiences. There's probably a whole nother webinar on that. And I won't go into that because I'm not a brain science person, wouldn't dream to be that smart. But I do want you to know that all of those things are very explainable and they're very plausible in the aftermath of trauma. And no matter what a survivor is giving you in that moment, as far as their emotional response, remember that if we listen, believe and validate and check in, right? Like, this seems really hard for you. How can I be helpful right now? Like, how can I help you? Like, what do you need? I'm here for you. Those small words can be very powerful, can restore healing, can restore trust, can even restore a sense of justice in the world after something so abhorrent has happened to them. Okay, fingers ready. Let's try some practice again. What are some things that you can say when you're checking in with someone? So someone has already disclosed to you, like, this really terrible thing happened to me, and I've had this experience. Okay, so what are some things that you like to say as a response? How can I help? That's so perfect. It's actually my go-to phrase. How can I be helpful right now? Is there anything that I can do? Right? And sometimes the answer to that question is no, but we ask it anyway because no, you can't help me, but just being here is helpful. How are you feeling? How are you coping? Yeah. Do you need anything? That sounds really hard. What kinds of things are you doing to take care of you? Because you're worthy of being taken care of. That's right. That's right. God, these are so good. I'm so pleased with this. You all are so smart. I love this so much. Okay. I'll give you guys some quick ones. What do you need right now? How can I be helpful? And is there someone else you'd like to be with right now? I always give my clients, my survivors, the right to fire me. You have the right to fire me. If I'm not your cup of tea, that is okay. Because quite frankly, I can't be everybody's cup of tea. As much as I was raised to be a people pleaser, I am letting go of that and I'm releasing that. I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And that's okay. I'm still going to show up and show out, be compassionate, love people when I can. And if I'm not, if it ain't me, that's okay, because I'm gonna let someone else step in, and let that person play their role with that person, because it's not really about me and my feelings anyway. All right, we're gonna quickly play a game. Okay, so get your chat fingers ready. Here we go. We're gonna talk about helpful versus hurtful. All right, type in the chat. Is this helpful or hurtful? What can I do for you right now? Helpful or hurtful? Helpful. That's right. Seen lots and lots and lots of helpful. Okay. Yes. What can I do for you right now is absolutely helpful. Okay. Come on, screen. Let's do this. You should report this. Helpful or hurtful? Okay. Could be both. Seeing a mix. Okay. Good. Thank you all so much for your honesty with this. That's perfectly fine. So I would encourage everyone to stay away from words like would, could, should, and ought. Because what we don't want to do is tell people what they would, could, should, and ought to do, because they're actually the experts on their situation. And what we don't want to do is work towards taking away their expertise and taking away their power and their decision making by telling them what we think they should do. Remember, we're decentering ourselves and putting them at the center. So you should report this, right? So I see in here that someone has suggested a rephrase, right? Like, would you like to report this? Or how would you feel? Or what do you think about reporting this, right? So that's another way that you can offer the option of reporting without telling the person what to do, okay? So let's take out the should, would, could, and ought out of our vocabulary when we're talking to survivors. Let's trust that person to be the expert on their situation. I promise you, survivors, I would bet on them 8 days a week. They know what to do to keep themselves safe. They know what they've been doing it. And no one knows their circumstances and what's safer or more productive than them. Like, we don't know that. Even after all these years of doing this, I've been doing this for like 18 something years. Even with all of that work experience in doing this, I don't know more about their life and their situation than they do. So I don't tell people what to do. What I can do is offer them options to explore. So a small rephrase of this would actually be really helpful. Okay, let's see if I can get the screen to cooperate. It happened so long ago. Why do you still think about it? Hurtful. Hurtful. Painful is painful no matter when it happened. Okay. And when you've had a violation of your trust and your body and your sense of being and your sense of purpose in this world, when you've had those experiences, you can't just turn off the thinking around it. You can't just turn off the feelings. Okay. I'm so glad. Is there someone I can call for you? Hurtful, all caps. I think that was for the last one. So, is there someone I can call for you? Yeah, that's helpful. That's helpful, right? Like, we give people the right to fire us because maybe we're not their cup of tea, or maybe we're not the person that they want. That's not a knock on us and our job and our willingness to be compassionate and kind. It just means that the person wants who they want, and that's an okay thing. We're allowed to want what we want. Oh, this is something I get a lot when I work with students. Why were you drinking anyway? You should know better. Hurtful, hurtful. Hurtful. Yes, yes. Alcohol is not the cause of IPV. Get to be exist in this world in the state that they're in, whether it's intoxicated or incapacitated by alcohol and or drugs. We get to exist in the world and be safe. That is not an invitation for someone to come and harm people. Okay. Thank you all so much. Okay. Now, keeping it moving because we're getting close to time and I want to be respectful of everybody. Okay, really quickly, what to do if someone is in crisis. I'm going to use crisis as probably a more general statement about to someone who may be having a difficult time regulating. So crisis means different things in different workspaces. So I don't want to confuse anyone, but so the way that I'm talking about crisis is when they're really like overwhelmed in their own head and they're real tangled up and their emotions are very loud and it's very hard for them to regulate their emotions. It's very, very hard to regulate their body, and it's very hard to regulate their emotional expressions, maybe their behavior. Okay, so these things can look like, anxiety or panic attacks, or just a lot of crying, racing thoughts. Anyway, all of those things. What to do when someone is, kind of just tangled up in their head in some emotional overwhelm. We offer to stay with them. In other words, the thing that I like to say to someone is, "I'm right here with you. You're safe with me." And then I go from there. I'm going to stay with you. I'm going to be right here with you. Just to give them that reassurance that they're not alone. Checking in. If the person is able to verbalize and able to talk, sometimes they're not, but sometimes they are. If they're able to talk, I might say something about like, "Can I get you something? What can I get you? Can I call someone? Do you want something to drink?" And remember, we're not making assumptions because those aren't helpful. We're just asking to see how they're doing, how they're thinking, how they're feeling. Do you want to talk, or do you just want to sit here? That's fine. And then support. I'm going to talk a little bit very quickly. I might have to go through it kind of fast, but I'm going to talk about some supportive things that we can do with folks when they are in crisis. Okay. Hopefully you all have heard about grounding or grounding techniques. It works because it uses the five senses to to help someone become, when they're up in their head and they're real tangled up and real involved in emotional overwhelm. The five senses, right? So we have see, touch, hear, smell, and taste. Engaging with these five senses can help a person get grounded back to the present moment and help them regulate their brain and their body. Okay. So I'm going to talk, I think we got time. I'll do, this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 activity with you. But some other things is if you can't remember all the steps to this activity, that's okay. That just, you can, do things to engage the five senses, by offering them something cold or warm to hold, right? Would you like to squeeze an ice cube or would you like a mug of hot tea? They don't have to drink it. They might just want to hold it. Another technique that I use is after someone has had a pretty rough day or a rough night and they show up in my office, I may say, would you like to lay your feet flat on the floor and just close your eyes and tell me about how your feet feel right now? And then you can do some breathing exercises if breathing is okay. I'm a person that likes to take like like 1 or 2 deep breaths, but more than that, I'll get dizzy. So, like you might want to check in with the person to say like, would you like to take a deep breath with me, or would you like to try some box breathing on a couple of rounds? You can also do things like, would you like for me to turn on music, or would you like to go outside for some fresh air or go for a walk if they're able and that is what they want to do. Okay, and all of those techniques, you can also, if you're not sure what box breathing is, you can find videos about different breathing exercises on YouTube that are very short and very easy for you to use. Okay. I only have 5 minutes. Okay, so 5 minutes. Let me get through the slides. And if we have like an extra 2 minutes, we'll do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 together. Okay, distract. Distract is a very effective coping skill, especially when people are really overwhelmed. Okay, we all use distraction at one point in our life in order for us to like figure out what our next move is going to be. We often use distraction as a way to like cope with something that's really hard. Distractions help us create some distance, emotional distance from the source of that stress so that we can get into better regulation of our body and our brain and our emotions. Okay, so some ways to distract. Do you want to watch a show together? Do you want to talk about your pet or your family or friends with me? Do you want to scroll on socials, or would you like to play a game on this phone? Tetris and as for whatever puzzly games have a tendency to really relax the brain. I don't know what about that is, but it does. And I will just share with you that when I very first started this work, I was working at the domestic violence shelter, and my go-to was, hey, do you want, on the first day that someone would arrive at the shelter, imagine that would be a pretty challenging day, but I would always offer to bake a cake or a batch of brownies with them. Because I love brownies and cake, but and most people do, but just in case, if they needed a distraction, I offered to go into the kitchen with them and show them around, and just distract them by baking a cake or some brownies. Okay, very quickly. You want to listen, if you need to know when to hand off to a professional. In other words, if this is something that I can be helpful with, but I also feel like it could be helpful if you wanted to talk to someone who does this for a living, these are your resources. Okay, so I've got some confidential campus resources here. I've got some other campus resources that are not confidential. And then we've also got the community resources and support lines, which most of those would also be confidential as well. Okay. Questions. We've got about 2 minutes to, I think that we can go through 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So in the chat, get your fingers ready. All right. If you want to, you are welcome to set your feet flat on the floor. Take a nice big deep breath. All right, fingers ready for the chat. The first 5 things that you as a person can see. Type it into the chat. 5 things that you can see. For me, I can see my computer screen. I can see some photos of my kid. I can see some Post-it notes. I can see a sticker, and I can see my phone. All right. Yeah, there we go. Laptop, vape, phone, sunglasses, purse. Right. Okay. 5 things you can see. Excellent. All right. Keep those fingers warm. I want to hear 4 things that you can touch. 4 things that you can touch. I can touch my notes in front of me. I can touch my phone. I can touch my keyboard. And I can also touch my hair, which is usually a stimming technique that I use, but I've been very good and not had to need it because you all have been such a wonderful audience today. Okay, awesome. Okay, keep your fingers ready. Are you ready to move on to the next thing? This one's going to take some concentration. Tell me 3 things that you can hear. I hear a fan. I can I can hear muffled voices from the next room over. I can hear some clicking in my ear. Okay. Oh, this is so good. Noise machine, air cleaner, coworker, fax machine, footsteps. Oh, that's so good. Okay. Next up, 2 things that you can smell. What can you smell? I smell coffee because I have a coffee next to me. And I just scratched my nose and I can smell my hand lotion. I smell my vape. I can smell my hair products. I can smell my coffee. Okay, good, 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 good. All right, last one together, and we're right at time. What is one thing? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One thing you can taste. I can taste my chapstick. Coffee, my mint, my gum, my bad breath. Yeah, I've been drinking coffee, so I have some coffee breath too. I'm not gonna lie. Okay, that's it. That is it for the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here is our contact information. Please feel welcome to follow us on socials or get in touch with us if you have any questions or concerns. I need those slides. I believe that Brooke has a copy of those slides. Brooke, you are welcome to share them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Could you scroll back to the resources slide in case anybody wants to take a picture of that in the meantime?
Can do it. Here
That
we go.
would be great. That was wonderful. I am putting in the chat the link for the survey if you would like a continuing education certificate for if you're a peer support specialist. So please go to the chat right now, grab that link. And thank you so much, Lindsay. I love how you underlined knowing your role when someone discloses to you and how your job is not to be the investigator. You just want to be the listener, the validator, be supportive. I thought that was just so excellent, especially when us in the recovery community, I mean, we want to like fix people, help people, and it's like we kind of want to run to the solution or problem solve, and just pausing and listening and validating is so powerful. It can be really healing. So love that
I
you
relieve
emphasize that.
I relieve everyone here of the job of being a fact finder. That's not that, like, you are relieved from that duty and that job. Like, deep breath, you got this. You do not have to do that job.
Great. Well, thanks again. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us on the webinar, and we'll be sending out the slides. And thank you, Rachel, for the Harm Reduction Hub update. Hope everyone has a beautiful day.